Hey everybody, it's Matt Colville, and we are going to make a human fighter in every edition of D&D. This is the third installment, and we are going to be making a character in Basic D&D, which didn't exist in 1974, 1976. Before now, there was just Dungeons and Dragons. But at this point, the game is going to explode in popularity. Thanks to my sainted mother, we just went down to the mall. We would go every week. My mom and I would go to the mall. And as long as I was reading, she didn't really care what I was reading. So I just devoured science fiction and fantasy. And at places like Walden Books or B. Dalton, you could get, no, not this B. Dalton. This is the new B. Dalton. There would have been that. Yeah, there we go. So at places at Walden Books and B. Dalton, you could get the Dungeons and Dragons basic set starting in around 1979. And so at this point now, it's going to go from being a game that a few people play in the Midwest, in LA, Southern California, some other places. There are pockets of the game in various places. Now it's going to become a cultural phenomenon. And this is the D&D we all know and love. And for various reasons, Gary Gygax decides to split the game. Or I should say maybe the decision was made. It's not clear to me how involved or how in favor of this decision Gary was. But certainly he felt as though Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which we're not covering today, was the normal version of the game. And that this version, Basic D&D, was kind of the introductory way to get into the game. It's a simplified version of the game. Now, that is funny and interesting to me as a player now, because in 1986, we playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons thought that the baseline was pick a class and a race. I want to be a human fighter. I want to be an elven fighter. I want to be a human mage or a dwarven mage. You could have any combination of class and race was possible. And we thought that the rules in this version were the kind of dumbed down, overly simplified. Like, because one of the things you find out very quickly is when you go to check out character classes, we can play a cleric, a dwarf, an elf. See, elf is a class, along with cleric and dwarf. Fighters are a class. Halflings are a class. So you can't play a halfling magic. It's not possible. The rules do not support playing a halfling magic user. And we thought this was kind of the goofy, okay, so you're 9 years old, and you need to understand, we're going to simplify things. But in point of fact, what we've learned watching the videos, the first two videos, is that this was core to the game. Like that you could play a dwarf, but you couldn't play a dwarven magic user. You could play a dwarven fighter who was also a dwarven cleric. Like dwarves and elves didn't really experience class the way humans did. Class, fighter, magic user, thief, was a human concept. So every time you read about dwarves or elves in the first two videos, you get all these weird exceptions as the authors are trying to kind of, without saying it, they're trying to say, hey, these guys don't follow the same rules. Dwarves and elves are these older civilizations. They've been around much, much longer, and it's the highly specialized humans that need to worry about, am I a fighter or am I a magic user? And so the rules here in the basic edition of the game codify that, and they say, look, we're not, that's too confused. Like it's weird reading that, you can be a dwarf and you can just pick what class you want to be unless you want to be a cleric. Oh, there are dwarven clerics out there, you just can't be one. So here they just flat out say, look, cleric is a class, dwarf is a class, pick one. We are going to pick human fighter, so we need to make a character sheet. Let's see. And I'm not, because I'm still very much in fun. Like, let's see how they do it, and you'll understand why I'm not using the official character sheet that comes with Fantasy Grounds. Because oh, look at that beautiful non-repro blue. I would not understand why maps and charts and things were in this color for many years, but the reason is because this specific color of blue would not reproduce, non-repro, not reproduce in a photocopier. So if you wanted to photocopy this and pass it around, you would just get, it would get like a black page, and you'd waste a lot of ink. So the first, we don't need to read what the game is about or how to use this book. There's nothing really spectacularly interesting in here. But you'll notice that they tell you right out of the gate, write it all down, which is funny because there is a character sheet in here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Look, there is a character sheet in here, right? But they are very much in the old school tradition. They're like, no, paper, pencil, Borg the fighter. You're going to write it down. So because they wrote it down, we're going to write it down. And because I'm not savvy enough to get like a Wacom tablet and actually write, that would kind of screw with me, we're going to type. So this is Duncan version 3. Duncan the Third. I think that's, when we would, because we were not super worried about verisimilitude when our characters would die. Especially if your character died an ignominious death. Like you just rolled this character up and you rolled 2 hit points and you got hit by a sling stone from a goblin and you died. You'd be like, okay, that's crap. I still want to play that character. So I'm going to make a new dude and I'm just going to call him, that dude the second, that dude the third. And you could sometimes get like that dude the 9th. And people sometimes get very stubborn about these things. So his name, Duncan. You can see that the video is already moving along a little bit faster than the first couple because this is starting to get a little bit less like archaeology. Not much changes between 1976 and this edition of the game. In fact, things change much more between these first 3 videos and AD&D than they do. Certainly, so far the big change has been Greyhawk 1976. This just takes Greyhawk from 1976 and kind of writes it down in a more straightforward manner. In fact, even more straightforward. It's funny because we can very simply make a character here because the first thing it does, there's a little introduction here, which we are going to get into because it uses some terms that I'm surprised at this point now, 6 years after the game came out, they are still taking seriously because I knew no one who played like this. I've never met anybody who played like this. There was this notion of like meta roles within the party. One of the players would be the mapper. Remember we talked about dwarves, and dwarves had abilities that let them kind of thwart the GM's desire, the game master or dungeon master's desire, to confuse or confound the players by getting them lost in the dungeon. And so one of the players would be the guy in charge of keeping track of the map. And indeed, in virtually every time I play, one of the players is the guy that manages the map. But it's often me. I'll take that map and say, "Give me your map," and then I'll draw on that map and hand it back to them and say, "That's what you see." And they go, "Oh, okay, I get it." But here's the interesting part. So I mean, you need a map of a dungeon. If you're exploring a dungeon, you want a map. That makes sense. But to avoid confusion, which I think is an interesting phrase used quite wrongly here, one of the players should be selected to speak on behalf of the entire party. That player is named the caller. So it's his job, and I get it, I understand that when you've got 6 players, 6 or more, and the GM says, okay, what are you guys going to do? It can take quite a while for those 6 players to agree on what they're going to do. And the idea here is that one of the players, the caller, would just, he would be the player wrangler. And it would be his job to make sure that everybody had their shit together and that you knew what you were doing. And then so you might waffle back and forth between one thing or another. And then the caller would say, okay, Dave is going to attack. Right. And Dave would say, okay, fine, I'll attack. And that, I find that a strange idea for a lot of reasons, because my attitude is, as the GM, if the players are arguing about what to do, they're playing the game. That's the game, is sitting around the table figuring out what are we going to do? What's the right thing to do? What are our options? It's planning, it's tactics, it's strategy, it's it's brainstorming. And certainly there are times when that can get bogged down. But otherwise, that's the whole purpose. And the idea of like we're going to promote one of the players to speak for the party to avoid confusion. Certainly it's much less confusing to just say, Dave, it's your turn. What are you going to do? And then Dave thinks about it and he goes. This is the way I've been playing for 30 years. It's completely not confusing. Certainly, this idea is more weird and more confusing to me. There's also something we're going to see later on. Here we could talk use of the word level. Look how important this issue is. It's on like the 3rd page of the book, and we need to kind of talk to the player about the word level, because we're afraid the player is going to get confused. Look, your character has a level, spells have a level, monsters have a level, and the dungeon has a level. So don't freak out, because you're going to hear level. But in context, these uses of the word level will be fine. You'll get it. Don't worry about it. But in fact, Gary will go on, we'll see in the next video, to kind of give players another set of terms. Motherfucker loved using different terms, often obscure, jargony terms, for stuff that people basically already understood. So we're making a dude. Yeah, I said this was going to be a short video, and I may have lied, but I don't think so. I think we're going to get through it relatively quickly, because here you can see how to create a player character. It's all spelled out. It's very straightforward. For the first time, we are going to worry about saving throws. Oh, can I highlight this? That's hysterical. Well done. I bought this PDF from dndclassics.com, which I strongly recommend to if you're interested in just going and reading. Hey, if you're interested in playing D&D, go buy some PDFs off of dndclassics.com. It's super great. I'll put a link in the below the like button. And below the like button. It's a phrase that I hear all the time because that's the person authoring the video, which is to say, in this instance, me, wants you to click the like button. So they say, oh, by the way, below the like button, as opposed to in the about box, which is where it really, in the about box, you'll be able to find a link to dndclassics.com. I get no kickback from these guys. I just think it's neat being able to buy stuff like this, and they're incredibly good scans, as you can see, because I can actually highlight this font ? The handwriting. Certainly, this is a handwriting. They wrote it down, so we're going to write it down. And we're just going to go step by step through this. You'll see that for the first time, we're going to keep track of our saving throws because for the first time, we are rolling all of our stuff. We're going to roll our stats. The player is going to roll his own stats for the first time. And that seems important to me, but maybe not for the reason you might guess, because certainly it seemed weird. It seemed dumb in the previous two videos that the game master, the GM, the dungeon master, the guy running the game, that he would roll your stats for you. Because I've always rolled players. I mean, it would be very strange for you to buy a copy of like Skyrim or something, and Obsidian made the decision what you're going to play, right? That would be weird. But in point of fact, having thought about it, having done some reading on this, I actually think that's not a dumb idea at all. I hesitate to say that it's a good idea, but I want to talk about why they did it that way, because they still had the idea that you needed to, a fighter needs a high strength. A fighter with a low strength is going to be challenging to play, and if the strength is low enough, it's not going to be fun to play. And we want the players to have fun, right? A wizard with a low intelligence, or indeed, you could have just all your stats be just terrible and bad. And if that happens, then you feel like I'm stuck with it. Surely I can't just re-roll, because if I did that, I'd just be able to continue to re-roll my character until I got a guy with ridiculously high stats. So you feel this obligation to play this character that you just made, and you find yourself hoping that he dies in the next, 20 minutes, so you can make the real character that you sat down wanting to play. And so having the GM roll your stats for you allows the GM to curate that experience. So he rolls the stats. He goes, oh, you want to play a human fighter? He'll talk to you. He'll say, what do you want to play? Oh, I want to play a human fighter. Oh, okay. And he'll roll stats for you, and he probably won't give you an 18 strength, because that would be... But he can just roll, and he can let the dice fall where they may, and he can go, Jim wants to play a human fighter, and I just rolled a 3 for... I won't tell him that, because I've got a GM's screen, so he can't see my rolls. I'll say, your strength is 15. And he goes, oh, good. And then maybe I'll throw you a bone, or I'll throw you a curveball. I'll give you a high constitution, but maybe I'll also give you a high intelligence. So now your fighter is unusual. I'll give you a low charisma, right? So now I can curate the experience. So you get to play what you want to play. But also there are some interesting details and some challenges thrown in there that make your character interesting. Where if you just let the dice fall where they may, which we're going to do, who knows what's going to happen, you may end up with these kind of Franken characters that are unplayable, that are just immediately you look at them and they're not fun. And in 1979, when this box set came out, it doesn't look as though they had figured out that rolling your own stats meant you could get bastard characters that no one would want to play. But by the 1983, when this came out, which is essentially the same game, except with this lovely Larry Elmore art, they did figure out that it's not fun to kind of get boned during character creation, because here, when you roll your stats, it explicitly says, if your highest roll is less than 9, you should roll all the scores again, right? This is a rule that we saw... I don't believe it was in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons or in 2nd edition D&D. I encountered it for the first time in 3rd edition. In the year 2000, so 17 years after this came out, I first encountered the notion of kind of the mulligan. I rolled so badly that this character, we can all agree, the rules agree, this character is unplayable. And you can roll again. But it's actually built into Basic D&D from 1983. If 2 or more ability scores are less than 6. So even if I got an 18 strength, if I have a 5 constitution and a 5 intelligence, I'm going to have a bad time. So this type of character should also be discarded unless the DM, because the DM is, unless the DM says otherwise. By the time we get to, this, so it's been 3 or 4 years and people have kind of figured out, that wasn't fun. So letting the dice fall where they may, not always a good idea. But that's what we're going to do because that's what this says to do. So let's see. Name Duncan, and his class is Fighter. As a fighter, we're going to check out and see what does Duncan get. Let's see. Fighters. Fighters are humans who train for battle. Okay, great. And one of the things I like is I believe this is the first time that they explicitly call out examples of who that I've heard of would be called a fighter. Well, Hercules would be a fighter. That's maybe a bad example, as Hercules is like a demigod, but I do think it's a good trend toward just communicating naturally to the player and say, look, you've seen movies, you've read books. Here are characters from those movies and those books that are like this. So the prime requisite, blah blah blah. Special abilities, none. Though they have no special abilities, they're very powerful characters. Trust us. Just trust us. They're very powerful. How powerful? Very powerful. Their greater endurance, that just means more hit points. Strong armor, that's true. They can wear heavy armor. They get to use pretty much any weapon, and great strength. They don't have any greater strength than anybody else. They get the same 3d6 everybody else gets. Makes them okay, so let's see what Duncan the Fighter is going to get for stats. Let's just write them down. Okay, ladies and germs, we are going to roll 3d6 in order to see what we get. Duncan the Third, how strong are you? You have an 8 strength, Duncan the Third, which is we are well on our way to re-rolling our first character. And what's your intelligence there, Duncan? That's not bad. 13 int. Duncan the Fighter, smarter than he is strong. Are you very wise, Duncan? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You're of, I would say, lower than average wisdom. Are you dexterous? A high dex fighter is no. Oh no, you are not. You are not dexterous at all. It's a good thing shoelaces haven't been invented yet, because you would not be able to tie yours, Duncan the Third. Let's see. Maybe you're just hardy. That would be fine. I would be perfectly happy with a incredibly clumsy but strong like ox. Well, not strong like very healthy ox. 12. I'll take a 12 Constitution. I don't think I get any bonus for that. And let's see. Am I charismatic? 6, 7, 8, 9. Not really. Below average charisma. So below average strength, above average intelligence, below average wisdom, minimum dexterity. I am as dexterous as I would say roughly as dexterous as like a tortoise. But the funny thing is, my high stat, Duncan would be a much better magic user than he would be a fighter. But we got to in fact, it's only my stubbornness. Let's agree that makes Duncan a fighter. There's no the rule book says roll your stats first and then pick what you're going to play. But that's not these videos. These videos are Duncan the Fighter. And so now Duncan has we're almost done at this point. Let me write down hit points, armor class. I'm going to write down saving throws. And if we look here, in Basic D&D, you only save as your class. Level does not come into it. And I believe, let's see. Yeah, you want to roll higher than, so as you can see, things get worse as you go down the list. So as a fighter, it's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, pretty straightforward. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. You know what I would like to do? I would like to just make it look pretty because I can. And let's make it a list. Oh, fine. I'm going to have to make a list manually, which I did. There. Boom. Look at that. Nice, beautiful, pretty little list. I don't know why I did my saving throws first. Certainly we're more interested in hit points and armor class, but let's see what I get. What do I get for my stats? Here's my strength with my 8 strength. Wow. Do I really have an 8 strength? I do, which means I have a penalty to hit damage and open doors. I wonder if I can just copy this from here and paste it into Fantasy Grounds. What is this? What does that mean? Strength 8. Yep, look at that. Thank God. Intelligence 13. Well, maybe I get something cool for having a high intelligence. Hey, listen to that. I can read and write my native languages. Oh, good. And I get an additional language. Hey, what? Hey, I can speak an interesting language. What do you know? So, there we go. Wisdom 9. What does a 9 wisdom get me? Normal magic-based saving throws. Not going to write anything down. My dex of 3. Wow. Wow. Holy carp. This is, okay, so -3, to hit minus 3 to hit on my missile fire adjustments. Not ranged. That would be English, and we would understand it. No, I'm minus 3 to hit on my missile fire adjustments. This is one of those things where, like, they knew they were making this box set for kids all over the country that had certainly never played any war game ever in their lives. But I have to believe that there's a certain kind of ego in what they're doing, where they're like, well, we want them to learn the terms that we've used all our lives because we think they're neat. So we're going to use missile fire adjustment because that's how you describe that stuff in a war game, rather than just saying ranged attacks. Minus 3 to hit, thanks to my incredibly bad dexterity, and things get much worse. I gain a plus 3, because remember, higher is worse. Plus 3 to my armor class and minus 2 to initiative. So plus 3 AC and minus 2 initiative. And this is the first time, I think, notice it's an optional rule. This is the first time, I believe, that we're seeing high dex means you get to go first, or later, in the initiative order, which I find fascinating. This is it's good. This applies only to individual initiative, who will strike first, not party initiative, which is interesting. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but that's not this video. This video is the Making a Dude video. Later on, if you stay tuned, we will have another series of videos in which Duncan the Fighter takes on a goblin, and we're going to see what happens. But that's not yet. So I'm minus 2 to my initiative. So now let's see how many hit points do I have. According to a fighter, I get a D8. Nope, I'm a veteran. So I'm going to actually put down class fighter. I'm going to put in parentheses veteran. Because I quite like level titles. I always have. I'm level 1. I'm level 1. And I'm going to write experience. 0. Look at that. All right, let's see what 12. Why am I talking about my hit points when I still have to worry about my constitution? So let's see what my constitution gets me. Constitution of 12, no adjustments to hit points, and charisma of 9 means a maximum number of retainers. I get no adjustment to reactions, which means if I meet somebody who's friendly, he's going to stay friendly. If I meet somebody who's pissed off at me, he's going to stay pissed off at me. Number of retainers 4, and the morale of retainers is 7. I believe this is the first time we're going to see morale adjustments, which is a roll you make to see when shit goes down, do your retainers fuck off and panic and flee and say, nope, not worth it. So maximum number of retainers 4, morale, max retainers. Morale is 7. How many hit points? Fighters get a D8 for hit points. Dos hit points, por favor. At least they are not... God. Duncan. God. Come on, Duncan. Get your shit together. So Duncan is not going to be the best fighter in the world. He doesn't get a bonus to hit. He gets a penalty to hit. Now, here's what's interesting about this. This is a big deal at first level, but very quickly it will stop being a big deal because all of these stat-based problems can all, well, not hit points, but all of these stat-based problems can all be overcome with magic items. And indeed, that is the purpose of adventuring, is to gather more magic items. So we're very quickly going to find weapons or gauntlets or belts. Hopefully not a girdle of femininity, masculinity, although that could be fun. But a girdle of like giant strength, or a belt of giant strength, or gauntlets of ogre power, and they will add to our strength. So this is a temporary problem. Eventually we will get greater than 8 strength. Hit points too, the only thing to do about that is level up. As far as I know, there was no obvious way via magic or anything else to increase your hit points at this point in the history of the game. So I don't know. What do you think Duncan's? How would you measure Duncan's life expectancy in rounds? It seems like 7 is about 5 or 6. Maybe at that point someone's going to hit him and do damage, and he will be done. Well, how do we avoid that? We're going to buy some armor. We're going to get some gold. 3d6 times 10. 1, 2, 3. Hey, that's not bad. What is that? 14. 6 and 5 is 11. 12, 13, 14. 140 gold. And then equipment. Now, at this point in the game, buying equipment is still fun, at least to me, because when you're at first level in Basic D&D, Your equipment, just like in the Greyhawk version, just like in 1974, your equipment is how you're going to solve most of your problems. Having an 8 strength, obviously that's not ideal when you're in combat. Having 2 hit points, ditto. But a lot of the challenges you face in a dungeon in the wilderness can't be overcome by fighting in the first place. You have to use your wits and your gear. And your wits are stored in your head, not on your character sheet. Your gear, however, is written down, so let's buy some. All right, so I've spent my gold. I have 4 gold left. I bought a normal sword, I bought a longbow, I bought a quiver with 20 arrows, because it occurred to me in a flash of insight that maybe if I can't hit it with my sword because it's a flying harpy, or I'm playing in Jim Murphy's campaign and it's a sturge, then I need something that has a decent chance of doing damage at range. I bought some plate and shield because I rolled well on my gold and I had enough to afford it. Now this is where you start to get the, hey, I rolled crappy on my gold, therefore I can't afford nice things. But I rolled pretty well. So I could afford plate and shield, which would normally give me an armor class of 2 plate and shield, except because my dexterity is really terrible, it's actually 3 greater than that, 5. Awesome. So I'm roughly even though I'm wearing plate and shield, it's as though I were just wearing normal chainmail. And you know, this, by the way, this is the entire equipment list. This right here. You know, that's it. And it's interesting. Once again, it's interesting to use this as a kind of a window into what they thought was important. Rope, that's important. I mean, having rope, like, that's going to solve a lot of problems. Thieves need thieves' tools. Why is it on this list, though, really? And it's one of the most expensive items on here. What's the point of anybody else buying it? I guess anybody could buy it. I haven't read what thieves' tools do. Tinderbox and flint, I didn't buy those. I just bought, you know, what I thought I needed to survive. I got a backpack, food, water, well, not water, but a place to put water. Presumably water can be found. And I bought some rope, and that gives me 4 gold left. I could spend it. I could buy a pole, but I think I'll just get a stick. Let's see. And then Wolfsbane, which is interesting. Why is Wolfsbane in here? And look at how expensive it is. It is among the most expensive things you can get. I wonder, is there a description of this stuff? No. The next thing is languages. So they don't actually tell you what this stuff does. But what I'd like to know is, I don't know how much damage my weapons do. Oh, this is interesting. So we talked about how this edition of the game, the same edition, just another printing, Basic D&D from 1983 as opposed to Basic D&D from 1979, has rules in it for characters that rolling characters very badly and starting over. It turns out this edition has the same thing, hopeless characters. Although it doesn't give as explicit a set of directions. It just says if you are below average in every ability, which Duncan is not. Duncan has a 13 intelligence, which is above average. Or who has more than one very low ability between 3 and 6. Duncan does not. Duncan has one ability between 3 and 6. Then you might want to consider, the DM may declare the character to be, now this is much more kind of in the, I mean, this is the beginning of hopeless characters. Let's just call the term hopeless characters. This is the beginning of hopeless characters, and it's very much the GM's discretion, and it's a very kind of nebulous, like, things have to be really bad before the DM could declare the character not suited for dangerous adventure. And I know a lot of people who felt like that the whole point was like dealing with adversity in the die rolls, and the die rolls didn't go your way. That's there are probably people out there who are not as strong as average, but smarter than average, and not very wise, and incredibly clumsy, and about as healthy as a normal person, but not very charismatic. Why can't they be fighters? Go play him. But at the end of the day, the goal here is to have fun, and if your character is crap, like, I would probably, like, at this day and age, certainly I would give Duncan the Third a try and see what I could do, because I know that I'm going to get that strength up with various cool stuff. The hit point thing, that's a real problem. But it takes about 5 minutes to make one of these dudes. It's not hard to do. Oh, one of the things we don't have alignment, so let's put it right up here near the top. And Duncan is lawful. Let's talk about what that means, and let's learn some interesting stuff here. So here we have alignment. Alignment gets an entire page. I don't know why I find that interesting, but I do, because, like, a fighter gets, what is that? Less than a quarter of a page. And this is the class I'm saddled with. This is how I interact with the world. But here I get a whole page on alignment. And one of the first and weirdest things we learn about alignment is that while there are still 3 of them, law, chaos, and neutrality, each alignment has a language that includes hand signals and other body motions. Like popping and locking? What are we talking about? Player characters always know how to speak their alignment language. So not only do I read and write my native language, which is common. Let's put languages down. Languages. Common. And I'm going to say Elven, because elves are cool. Not 11. Elven. I don't speak elves. I speak Elven. But I also speak my lawful alignment language. Lawful alignment. I'm just going to write that down as though it's real and I give a shit about it. Now, I find this, where I thought about, like, where I completely, still blown away by the idea of alignment language. Don't know where it came from. This may be the beginning of it. So I went online and looked it up, and actually Gary answered. He said, look, I'll tell you what I thought about it. This is a quote from him. As D&D was being quantified and qualified by the publication of the supplemental rules booklets, I decided that thieves' cant, which is basically Cockney rhyming slang, look it up, it's a real thing in the real world, and there were lots of them. Cockney rhyming slang is only one of them. Should not be the only secret language. Well, that's interesting. Thus, or therefore, alignment languages came into play. The rationale being they were akin to Hebrew for Jewish and Latin for Roman Catholic persons. Isn't that interesting? Gary thought that your alignment was your religion. Gary thought that what alignment you picked, are you on the side of law or chaos, or are you neutral, was your, not just your worldview, not just your psychology, not your behavior, it was your religion. And much like, people all over a certain part of the world could communicate in Hebrew, even though they probably also spoke another local native language. And then later, people all over a different part of the world could all speak Latin, even though some of them were from Germany or France or, wherever. There was this lingua franca. And so Gary thought that was a cool idea. He was going to throw it in there, and their alignment languages. He says, I have since regretted the addition because it was dumb. Oh, no, he doesn't say that. He says, as the non-cleric user would have only a limited vocabulary and little could, I just copied this and pasted this. Gary, not the best speller. Little could be conveyed or understood by the use of an alignment language between non-clerical users. So again, he's thinking about priests. He's thinking about religion. He's thinking alignment is religion. There's the gods of law and the gods of chaos. And maybe there are gods of neutrality, or maybe there are people who are just like, fuck it, I don't want to have anything to do with any of that. I mean, you got to think in a world where the gods are real and manifest in our world. There'd probably be a lot of people, actually, who would be like, you know what, don't have anything to do with that. Don't want to piss anybody off. Don't want to be on the right side or the wrong side. I just don't want to attract attention. I'll be neutral. How does man become neutral? So I'm lawful, which is in a certain sense a kind of religion or religious outlook, or it's which team I'm on in the war between the gods of law and the gods of chaos. And I get to speak the lawful alignment language, which I will never ever do and is dumb. And then we talk about what is law and chaos, and it just basically says law is like good and chaos is like evil. So we don't have the 9 alignments yet to the 3x3 matrix. We are still it's just a shorthand. But interestingly enough, this is not a simplified version of an earlier rule set. This is the base. Advanced D&D is an expansion. We always thought it was the other way around. We always thought Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was like normal D&D, and this was like retard D&D. That was offensive. Why would I use that phrase? This was like the simpler, easier version for younger kids who aren't sophisticated enough like us 15-year-olds to understand things like THACO. We'll get there. And then they go on to talk about like the behavior of a lawful character. If a choice must be made, I think this gets to the heart of it and is useful. If a choice must be made between the benefit of a group or an individual, a lawful character will usually choose the group. You will usually choose. It's a tendency, and it's about individuality versus the greater good. And that seems like a useful definition. And chaotic characters tend to be more selfish. That's fine. I think alignment is problematic, but core. It's still useful. So we're almost done. I don't know what else there. Oh yeah, that's not true. I want to know how much damage I do. How much does my normal sword? How much does my normal sword do in combat? And interestingly enough, we still have a D6. Everything does a D6, and then we have these optional rules for variable weapon damage. So let's check those out. So here is the damage based on weapon. My normal sword does a D8 damage, and the most you can do is a D10. And one of the things I like is they have things like torch in here, just an improvised weapon, club, D4. And you could probably, if you were clever, figure out like a fist would do maybe a D2, 1 to 2 points of damage, or if you're straight, so this you could probably extrapolate to other stuff. So my normal sword does 1d8, and it does 1d8 minus 1 because I only have a strength of 8. Fantastic. And my arrows do 1d6 minus 1. I'm going to presume that the minimum is 1. I don't even know if that's in here anywhere. It actually doesn't say in here if there's a minimum damage, which I find interesting. It just says, like, could you do negative damage? I'm so weak that when I hit you and I roll a 1 on damage, I heal you a little bit. That makes sense. That's science. You can't argue with that. And the last thing I think we need to do is we need to figure out what my attack matrix is. I don't know a better word for this, really, except that if I'm first to third level, I use these numbers here to figure out what I hit with. So I'm just going to copy this and see what happens if I paste it into Fantasy Grounds. So here I've added attack matrix. In fact, let's make that a header. And I wrote down Defender's AC, and then the roll needed to hit, and I did it lengthwise instead of down because I thought this would be relatively straightforward. So what you do in combat is you grab a 20-sided die, you roll, and you subtract your to-hit modifier. In this case, I'm saying subtract. It would be add if Duncan were competent. But I'm -1 to hit, so -1 from this roll. 8 minus 1 is 7, and I looked that up here, and I didn't hit anybody. I missed, right? Because I'd have to go backwards on this chart, and it would have been like Defender's AC like 12 or 13, and that's nobody has that. I would have hit a house. But in order for me to hit myself, let's see, I have armor class of 5, which means Duncan the Third A attacking Duncan the Third B. I would need a 14. Or actually, I would need a 15 because they'd be -1. So that's pretty bad. In order to hit armor class of 20, in order to hit armor class of 0, I would need a 19. So if I rolled a 20 -1, then I would hit an armor class of 0. So this is Duncan's character sheet, and it's got his name, his class, and his level title, his alignment, and the languages he speaks. He's first level. He has no experience. He's not that great strength-wise. He's relatively intelligent. Elven is, thanks to my intelligence of 13, not very wise, incredibly clumsy, normal health, not very charismatic. Hit points 2, survivability low. And it's interesting when you think about like what the job of the fighter is. So in this edition of the game, it says, my job is to fight monsters and protect the weaker members of the party. How do I do that? What mechanism do I have to do that with? Really, all it tells me is that I have more hit points, false, strong armor, which is true. I do have a relatively high armor class, but that's heavily thwarted by my minimally low. I've hit the minimum here of my armor class. So it would be very easy for somebody to make a much better fighter. So Duncan the Third, not that competent. He's got some decent gear because he rolled well on his cash, and that's it. He's going to go out into the world and hopefully at some point in the future fight a goblin. And next time we meet, we are going to play Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And I think Duncan's character sheet may get a little more complex.